One lone hero against overwhelming odds. I love being me.
Yeah, now that's blatant lies if I've ever heard it, because you'll never truly feel like Spider-Man, unless of course you feel nothing but shame and misery. Only then will you truly feel like Spider-Man. Greetings, I'm Solidus-Skully, and welcome back to Spider-Man 2, Enter the Electro, that is to say, the Electro of this game. Yeah, since we're pretty much just beating up villains and trying to beat them up to find out who their master is, spoiler alert, it's Electro, let's talk about Electro. A bit of an odd choice for a villain, because, and again, this obviously might vary depending on, you know, his portrayal in specific comics, or maybe a few issues of underrated stuff that I haven't seen, but Electro is kind of lame. I mean, I don't think I've ever really seen a version of Electro that's ever really impressed me, nor has really been that impactful. I mean, there was the animated series where he was like the Red Skull's son or some shit. By the animated series, I mean like the 90s cartoon, but that's, it wasn't really that good. I barely remember him doing anything, and that, like, he showed up, he shot people, and that's it. I mean, as for other versions of Electro, I mean, we have him in this game, and, you know, we'll get to him when we fucking get to him. There was the Amazing Spider-Man 2, where he was like a nerdy guy, then he got shocked by eels, and then he was like, I hate everybody, I want a world without Spider-Man. Even though he was like a Spider-Man fanboy for a bit, I don't fucking remember. I kind of think, I keep on convincing myself that I was drunk when I watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because it didn't sound like a movie that exists, it was just so poorly plotted and just, yeah. And, trying to think of what else. He was in the 2018 Spider-Man game where he was just And pretty much every other incarnation I've seen of him has either just been like a cameo or minor villain akin to Shocker, and then just over there just being like kind of Time
to get some answers.
Whoopee.
Alright, Chuckles. You're gonna tell me everything you know.
I ain't telling you spit!
I thought you'd say that. You know, I've never really suspended a man like this before. I hope this web line holds.
Okay. They said something about an airfield. Hangar 18. It's all I know, I swear.
Now there's a good thug. You see? You're not as dumb as you look. Look out!
Get up, wall crawler. I'm not done beating on you yet.
Shocker! Nice to see you too.
Ooh, you like that, huh? Well, hold still, cause you're gonna love this.
Oh no, it's the Shocker. And if you're expecting me to do that 90s animated series Shocker joke, no, leave me the fuck alone. Yeah, you do have the time limit of the flames running out, and Shocker can be difficult if you, well, obviously get caught in a shocking blast, but don't worry, just use your web yank, and that's pretty much all she wrote. I'll talk about a little bit more about the boss fight next time, but yeah, it's nothing too difficult. Unless you get hit like a dumbass.
I believe that's all the time we have for today. I think we made some real progress today, Shocker. I really do. Hey, when you get to prison, remember to share your feelings with the group, okay? Let's see. What was it that thug said? Hangar 18, right? There's a Hangar 18 at the airfield. I don't need pointy ears and a cape to figure out that this is probably another heist.
Batman! Yeah, anyway, the one thing I was gonna bring up about Shocker's boss fight is that, have they ever really innovated any Shocker boss fights that don't use the fucking web yanker thing onto him ability? I don't know. What do you think, spinning newspaper? Oh, that's your answer for everything.
Come from?
Nothing like defusing a bomb in the morning. And that's pretty much our mission of the now. I don't know if these people are meant to be working for Electro or if they're just random thugs setting off bombs in the city. You know, I'm kind of remiss to bring up this bit of trivia now, but since this does have more relevance towards the end of the game, but yeah, Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro, coming out in 2001, post-September 11th terrorist attacks. Yeah, some copies of the game, as did a fair few video games at the time, actually had some altered elements of the game. There is one specific thing at the end of the game that I will point out, and is probably a bit more well-known trivia for most Spider-Man fans who are pretty savvy about the game, but yeah, I'm surprised this mission didn't get altered, because a bunch of thugs have set up bombs around the city. Well, I think it's just one really, but basically Spider-Man has to go around, recover the 3 keys, 3 or 4 keys? Yeah, whatever. Basically recover keys from the bombs. Why the fuck did you have it be seconds later? What the fuck was up with that transition? Whatever, but basically you gotta travel around the city, input the key codes, and basically extend the timer on the bomb. It's basically a similar play on the bank vault mission from Spider-Man 1. That is to say, they never saw Spider-Man 1, nor the Spider-Man 1 movie game, nor the Spider-Man game or on like Commodore 64, or like the first Spider-Man game on Atari 2600, or whatever. Too many Spider-Mans, that's Spider-Man, the Spider-Man, the Spider-Man. Spider-Man! Well, Spider-Man, because you gotta put the hyphen in there. Anyway, the point is that I'm surprised this mission didn't get altered, because the failure penalty is having that bomb blow up, and you would have thought that, you know, circa 2001, when, you know, the American people were understandably traumatized by the fact that, you know, there was such a devastating attack on their homeland. Yeah, you would have thought this mission would have been one to receive the cup, but no, I guess maybe the fact that they didn't have it assaulting a building specifically is probably the reason why. Quite bizarre, but whatever, I suppose. Anyway, quite a fun mission, but I suppose it does also talk a little bit more dividends into Electro structure, in the sense that, again, what it does compared to Neversoft's Spider-Man isn't really too different. You have very similar mission structures and, you know, stuff that you have to do. They do play around with the structure just enough so that it does at least feel different from the Neversoft version, but at the same time, though, it's still relatively fun, despite just sort of being more like an arranged mode of the first game, so again, it doesn't quite hit the same level of basically feeling like an expansion pack, but at the same time, it's also, you know, something that feels like very recognizable ground if you play the first one and jump right into this one, so very easy to slip in and out of, but I guess your mileage may vary depending upon whether or not you either wanted to enter Electro to revolutionize what Neversoft had for the previous game, or if, you know, you just prefer what the first game did and wanted some more. Which does kind of make me wonder what a third game in this continuity would have been like, but I guess we'll never truly know. And that does also bring me to an interesting point about the game's sales, because I'm curious as to how this game sold, because I mean, it was for the PS1. So you might think the fact that the PS2 was out, the fact that it was only one console exclusive at a time when, you know, it was running into irrelevance somewhat. I mean, the PS2 did have backwards compatibility with PlayStation 1 games, so it kind of been that, you know, badly out of the loop, so I'm curious, would a PS2 port have helped sell the game a little bit more? Would maybe putting it to the Xbox or other consoles like the N64 or Dreamcast or whatever helped it out?
Now onto the airfield.
I'm not too sure, but anyway, we're off to the airfield to do the plot. What a distracting side tangent.
Looks like my hunch was right. Now to see what these guys are up to. This is getting serious. Wait a minute. That looks like the same briefcase that Shocker stole. If I can get this one, I bet I'll figure out what's going on here.
The cops will be here soon. When they show, make sure they have a good time.
They're gonna ambush the cops, and with some pretty heavy gear as well. I better hurry and take those machine guns out.
Oh, the seedy warehouse airstrip field thing. How mysterious. But yeah, this is also another part of the game where we get access to, I think, one of 2 different webbing abilities. Again, we saw the fire webbing in the first game to deal with the symbiotes, but Enter Electro gives us 2 different webbing power-ups to include in your web shooters. The first of which being is, well, what you're going to be seeing here, really, is the freeze webbing. Not really too different from your regular webbing, it's really more of an aesthetic thing, really, so I mean, it's really just there for this specific mission to jam up the guns, but yeah, that's pretty much all she wrote. There's nothing really different that it adds to gameplay functionality, or at least from what I could have seen. I don't know, you potentially could have maybe had some different webbing attacks, or maybe had like some different visual effects, but aside from the freezing thing, that's pretty much all you have. So yeah, it's kind of boring to be perfectly honest, so time for some more trivia. Even though this game is relatively short like the first one, and even that in and of itself, like, I mean, the game, it's, words, failing brain. I don't know why that's happening tonight. It's weird, but, yeah, I thought I had something to say, but brain shutting down.
Just like ice.
Yes, indeed, just like ice. Yeah, I'm sorry, I really got nothing for this. I thought I had something interesting, but there's not enough time to really go into a really massive tangent, nor is there really enough time to really, like, just waffle on about anything, really. So I suppose I could draw a bit more of a mystery as to our next villain. Because, unless, of course, you played Enter Electro before, the villain that, Shocker palmed off his, you know, mysterious briefcase of mysteriousness to is, well, a Spider-Man villain who isn't really a Spider-Man villain anymore, but does have, well, he'll surprise you, I'll say that much.
Whoa! Hey!
Take that, Spider Freak.
You tied up the pilot? Good. Now let's get out of here.
Quick, Spider Lad. You stop the plane, and I'll get the bad guys. Oh, wait. I don't have a sidekick. I guess a handy-dandy Spider Tracer will have to do while I rescue the pilot.
I'm curious, actually, is Spider-Lad ever a thing in the comics? I mean, I know the 2018 Spider-Man game tries to have, like, Peter have sort of like a sidekick thing going on with Miles Morales, and, generally, to my knowledge, I don't think Marvel generally did the whole sidekick thing. I think it was more of like a Stan Lee thing where he didn't want to see kids get hurt, but that was part of the reason why he was very, you know, disappointed with the whole idea of like a whole Batman and Robin scenario, although, then again, how exactly does Bucky Barnes fit into the whole thing with Captain America? Whatever. Talk about the gameplay, most importantly, with this mission is actually a bit of a pain in the arse mission for some people. Namely in terms of stopping the plane. Again, you've got a very limited runway to work with, clear out the barrels to make sure that it doesn't explode, and the precipice of this mission is basically to, you know, web up the propellers so that it gonks up the plane. It will take damage, and you basically got to balance between webbing up the propellers both at the same time and making sure that it doesn't crash into this very Tony Hawk's Pro Skater looking area. But yeah, this can be a little bit difficult, but try and balance webbing up both the two different aeroplane parts, because otherwise you are going to be FUCK'd in the USA. But yeah, can be a bit of a pain in the ass mission, but otherwise, you should be good if you're attentive and, you know, quick on your feet, taking out all the barrels, but yeah. Might be a bit of a problem for first-timers, but not for me. Ooh, look, a comic book. Golden.
I can check this out later in the gallery.
Yeah, similar to the first game, you can actually pick up comic books and examine them in the gallery. You can't read them as, like, full-on comics, but, I mean, you at least get to see what issues are there, so it's one benefit to these games. Although, I do actually remember the PS2 Ghost Rider game actually did something like that, where you could actually read, like, a few specific issues of, a couple of Ghost Rider comics, which was quite cool, actually. Kinda makes me wonder why more games don't do that, actually, because, I mean, it'd be a nice way of getting new readers to read iconic comic books.
Rise and shine, Captain! Okay, now that the pilot's safe, I have to get to that helicopter. I just hope whoever's behind this isn't one of those island base in the middle of nowhere types. I don't have that much web fluid.
There we go. Next mission is pretty much follow the thing before the spider signal gets too weak and you get a game over. Anyway, as I was saying earlier, it's curious to me, like, I mean, games like this did include the whole comic book gallery viewer to see the covers of iconic issues, but again, like, I mean, if you have, like, a specific superhero game based on a comic book story arc, kind of like how Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 was based on the whole Civil War kind of thing, why not include, like, the specific issues of the original comic in the games that are being based on the comic books? Because, I mean, wouldn't that be... I mean, again, like, I mean, it wouldn't run the whole gamut of, oh, but if they show them in the game, then how will comic book companies get money when, you know, having people play through the game that's based on the infamous comic book story arc would get people to possibly read it if they enjoyed it? And therefore get new readers to like the comic book thingies instead of ranting about them on the internet? because of certain comic book storylines not feeling like Spider-Man. Yeah, well, I got nothing really to say at this point, it's just sort of... whatever. I mean, to be honest, there's really nothing stopping you from just, running it off and going through. I mean, there are a few, as with previous games, a few hidden secrets here and there, and of course, the return of the trusty Spider-Man armor. That is... I'm sure it was probably a thing in the comics, but I remember mainly from the animated series with the very douchebaggy Iron Spider thing, where everything went right for him, and he was an asshole, and, there was a Spider Carnage thing. It's starting to sound like a bad comic book plot. Whatever, I really gotta rewatch the animated series one of these days. Although it does bring up a thing I was actually gonna talk about beforehand, actually, when we were back at the airstrip. Well, again, something I brought up as more of a question, really, is, what continuity of this is, the Neversoft and Vicarious Vision Spider-Man games are meant to be in, really? I mean, cause I heard, like, I'm pretty sure it's meant to be its own, but at the same time, I've also heard some people say it's meant to be based on the animated series, given some similar voice actors, but... I don't know, really. The continuity doesn't quite line up in some aspects, and, I was thinking maybe that it might have been like the prequel series to Spider-Man Unlimited, given, you know, Rino Romano voicing Spider-Man here as he does in that show. And the fact that, again, in Spider-Man Unlimited, like, when he meets the Counter-Earth version of Electro, he does mention meeting Electro before. So, are these games meant to be connected to that, since it was, well, at least at the time the games were in production, the at-the-time Spider-Man thing to tie into? I don't know, really. Although, I mean, kind of speaking of Spider-Man Unlimited, while we still have this random fuckabout mission to go on with in the late afternoon, yeah, I initially didn't really like Spider-Man Unlimited that much for, again, being this really weird, like, futuristic, bestial show with, like, Spider-Man in a world of, like, furry animals and cyberpunk aesthetics, but again, I gave it a watch rather recently, and gotta be honest, it held up a lot better than I initially remembered. I guess maybe I was still on my 90s animated series high at the point and I didn't really give it a fair chance, but... yeah, the storytelling in Spider-Man Unlimited was actually really well built up and quite solid for what it was worth. And then I remember that the show ended on a cliffhanger and that just brought my piss to a bit of a fucking boil, really. I mean, yeah, I guess you could probably say that it was competing against, you know, Batman Beyond and, you know, even in the 90s you had... kid shows that were a dime a dozen at that point. Then again, also the fact that the Sam Raimi movie was in production that probably prevented a second season from happening. It's kind of a shame, really, because Spider-Man Unlimited, I'm willing to say, was actually quite a good show. And I wish it had more exposure than in fact it did. Like a game, a continuation in a comic book form, maybe. But sadly, we got nothing. And, I mean, given the fact that Spider-Man 2099 is a thing with the whole Spider-Man of the future, it's kind of unlikely we'll ever see any of that again, which is... kind of saddening to me. Although I did hear in the recent Spider-Verse movie, actually, that they did reference the Spider-Man Unlimited theme song for Spider-Man 2099, but that's probably all we're gonna get. So on that depressing note, I am Solidus-Skully, and next time on Spider-Man 2, we finally find out who that mysterious trenchcoat guy is.